Good morning, afternoon and evening scale fans. Welcome back to part 2 of this Monogram Typhoon build. If you haven't seen part 1 or the kit review, you can find them on my channel or via the link above. Without further ado, let's get to it. We left it last time with the main build phase and the RAF camouflage paintwork complete. Next up, we are going to add those iconic Normandy invasion stripes. We start by masking off the white area for the stripes. At 1:1 scale on a single-engine aircraft, the width of the stripes was 18 inches. At 1/48 scale and converted to millimeters, that is approximately 9.5 millimeters per stripe and 47.5 millimeters total. The plan here is to start with the main white area, then paint the black stripes over the top. I mark the positions for the wing stripes, then I realized I needed to paint the tailband before marking the rear invasion stripes. This is painted with XF21 Sky by Tamiya. It's the standard mask and spray job, using the paint guide as a reference. Apologies for the lack of footage of this stage. With the tailband painted, I unwrap the masking. Once this is done, we should be clear to mark and mask all the stripes at the same time, both wings and the tail. With that last-minute realization out of the way, we can finally start masking off the areas for the invasion stripes. As you saw previously, I had already marked and masked the top surface, so it was just a case of joining the mask area together. Luckily, I remembered to keep the masking on the cannons after doing the main paintwork, so that was a bonus. I had, however, forgot to put the wheel well masks back in. Luckily, as they were plastic, they could simply slot into place. Now to mask the rear section that will have the stripes. I chose to make this a Typhoon from 198 Squadron that fought in Normandy, in particular plain TPV, of which only had the stripes on the underside, rather than all the way round. Next, I mask up the landing gear flaps, using the laid masking stripes as a guide. I'll put these aside to paint later, when applying the white layer. Apologies for the scattergun approach to the masking process. It's a case of realizing an order as we go. With the flaps masked and everything measured out, we can finally finish the masking. I go around the plane covering all the surfaces that won't get painted. It's always better to be safe than sorry when it comes to potential overspray. Using Tamiya XF2 flat white, mixed 50-50 with acrylic thinner, we can finally start laying down the white sections of the stripes. I find white the hardest color to paint. You have to be very patient, focusing on building up light layers to the desired finish. If we try and push too much paint out too quickly, it will pool and streak, resulting in a time-consuming repair job. The process is then repeated on the landing flaps we masked off earlier, again taking our time layering up the finish. With a nice even coat of white laid down, I start measuring out the black stripes. Starting with the landing gear flaps, I measure 9.5 millimeter sections and mask. Process is repeated on the wings, measuring 9.5 millimeter lines and masking off. We take our time measuring both the top of the wing and the underside before sticking the masking tape down. This is crucial to get nice straight lines. With the first stripe masked, this gives me the foundation for the inner stripe, again repeating the process until all the areas we want to remain white are masked. With all the masking on the wings done, it's now time for the rear tail stripes. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but yep, you guessed, repeat the process. Mask 3 white stripes, ready for the 2 black ones. Finally, with all the masking done, it's time to paint. Using XF1 flat black mixed 50-50 with thinner, I spray down an even layer where the black stripes will be. Black is a lot easier than white to spray, so this all goes down relatively quickly. We paint the landing gear flaps at the same time. Once complete, it's time to unwrap. This is the final unwrapping session on this build, and as always, it's so satisfying to see the crisp paintwork being revealed. As per, it's important to take your time and be careful. We don't want to ruin the paint at this stage. With all the masking removed, we can see the final paintwork in all its glory. Now to paint some details. Using XF85 rubber black with some thinners, I hand paint the tyres. I find when hand painting using Tamiya acrylics, it's best to use a healthy amount of thinners and paint in light layers. This will avoid it clumping. The landing gear can be semi-built now. All the components are unwrapped and ready for install. Now on to finishing the propeller. Using XF3 flat yellow, I airbrush the wingtips. Yellow is like white to airbrush. You need to put it on a low pressure and be patient. I apply many light coats, building up the finish, slowly but surely. For the nose of the propeller, I went for red. It's up for debate if it was red on the real plane, but it certainly looks that way from reference photos. This layer took a lot longer to paint than expected. It might have been the gloss black underneath causing an issue. This required me to spray a mega amount of thin layers, building up the red finish. Eventually we got there, with what I think are some good-looking results. Using some extra thin cement, I attach the clear lenses on the wings. Need to be very careful using cement with clear parts. Too much, and it will go cloudy. I know, more masking, but this time it's just a small area for the yellow wing markings. These were put on the front face of the wings as identification markers. This massively aided Allied aircraft identify between friend and foe. After a fair few carefully sprayed coats of yellow, we can unwrap the wings for the last time. Next, the landing gear parts are attached using some clear CA glue. Now it's time to paint and fit the iconic wing-mounted rockets. I masked off the grey mounts that I painted earlier, and using XF81 green, I paint the rockets. Mounting them to the underside of the wing is nice and simple. A small dab of extra thin cement is added, and they simply press into place. Next up, I paint the exhaust banks using gunmetal grey. These details are actually pre-molded onto the fuselage, so I keep this element nice and simple and don't over-complicate it. That pretty much concludes all the painting, so I lay down a layer of clear coat to lock it all in. For this I used a satin acrylic varnish by VMS. This is sprayed directly from bottle onto model. To prepare for decals, I spray a layer of Tamiya clear gloss where they will be placed. This will make the application of the decals much easier. The decals that came with the kit were completely fudged, so I decided to go down the route of making my own. To print them, we need to print the design onto decal paper, leave to dry for 24 hours, then finally clear coat over the top to lock in the ink. Once fully dry, we can cut them out and treat them like a normal decal. When printed on white, we need to cut them tight to the print. If printed on clear, you can leave some excess like you would on a traditional decal. I actually tried both the clear and white decal paper with the wing target. The clear didn't go so well. As it has no white backing, the design appears very dark over the camouflage. On top of this, the ink started to melt when microsol was applied. The inkjet decals were going to be a hell of a lot more fragile than standard kit ones. Next, I tried the white-backed printed decals. Spoiler alert, these were a lot better. The color was much bolder than before, and the decal overall seemed more robust. However, I couldn't stop the edges from fading, which left a white halo around the targets. Although making my own decals was a good learning experience, the quality just isn't there. Next time I will certainly make my own masks and paint the markings on instead. Another small bit of painting that I forgot to do earlier, and that is the wing walkways. These were grip panels on the wings for the pilots to walk on. As we did earlier with the wingtips, it's a simple mask, paint and peel situation. Paint finished used was XF1 flat black. Now to do the final clear coat to lock in the decals and one last layer of protection for the paint. Again, I'm using VMS satin finish straight from bottle to nozzle. Now finally, we can take off the mask on the canopy. This part for me always signals the near end to a plane build. That canopy mask stays on there for so long, then boom, we're nearly there. I attach the clear lights to the wingtips, again using a very small amount of extra thin cement. Now time for some weathering. For this I'll mainly be using this enamel line wash by MIG Ammo. As this model has raised panel lines, I'll be going over these areas and blending out with some enamel thinner. This will both give the panel lines some definition and add to a used effect. Next, I'm going to add a small amount of light dust. This is applied dry and blended in place with enamel thinner. This will give a streaky, dirty effect, so I ensure to brush in the direction it would wash off. To tone down the faded outlines from the decals, I carefully paint the edges, first with blue and then with the green. Still not perfect, but it certainly helped hide the faded white line. For the final piece of this puzzle, I'm going to add some black smoke streaks from the cannons and the exhausts. For this, I'm using flat black, but mixing 1:4 with thinner. This gives an almost translucent formula, perfect for staining rather than painting. There we go, Monogram Typhoon complete. It's been a fun one, a few new techniques learnt, a few staples repeated. Not the craziest build, but they don't all have to be super high detailed mega models. If you have enjoyed this video, please could I ask that you like and subscribe to the channel? That would certainly help me out. Thank you. Thanks again for joining me for this mini build series. More to come very, very soon. Happy modeling, everybody.